What is Jesus's love language? There was a book that came out, if you remember, some time ago that talked about the different love languages and how we all differently feel and express love. Some would say, I feel loved by words of affirmation, meaning that if you spoke to them and said things that were encouraging and affirmed them, they felt loved. While others felt loved through touch, some others through time spent with them, and others gifts, and so on it would go. There was 5 different love languages. What is Jesus's love language? Yeshua's love language. If you wanted to show him that you really, really do love him, and you meant it from the bottom of your heart, how would you show it to him? How would he accept it? By what form does he listen to? Well, if you looked at your screen up to this point, or have read this chapter already, as I'm hoping you would have, it should have jumped out to you, right? Because in verse 15 of chapter 14 of John, you see his words. If you love me, you will keep my commands, my commandments. I don't know how to make it any more simple than that. He didn't say, if you love me, you'll go to church. He didn't say, if you'll love me, you'll have nostalgic feelings about me. He didn't say, if you love me, you'll believe what I'm saying is true. He says, if you love me, you'll do it. You'll do actually what I'm saying. Oh my, how close we come to almost obeying, to getting close to obedience. And we're so creative in fashioning rules for ourselves that says, well, as long as I do more good than bad, well, I did better today. And he's like, I'm so clear. If you love me, just do what I said. Not what your parents are, not just what your parents are saying, not just what your bosses are saying, not just what some administrator or supervisor or CEO or teacher, whatever it is. Sometimes we can be more obedient to them because we see them and they holding us accountable. However, he says, will you do what I say? This is how I connect love. Now, there's not a whole, while this is pretty clear, it's still important to expound on this a little bit because as I shared in the previous lesson, our understanding of love is so skewed if you're listening to and watching the actions of Hollywood. Because everything on TV and on the screens tell you that love is associated with strong feelings. Strong feelings. I'm in love. I'm not in love. I fell in love. I fell out of love. However, he says, if you love me, it has nothing to do with your feelings. I got this great response in my heart towards Jesus. No. If you love me, do what I told you to. It's just that plain and simple. And I think there's going to be an implication of first understanding what has he told you to do. Are you keeping up to date and reading and praying and meditating on his word so that you know what he's calling you to do? And then keeping in step with the very thing that you know he's calling you to do. And I will take that even further and say there are some things that God has put on your spirit that is not handwritten in the scriptures, but he's called you to do that thing. For instance, for me, making this video is one of those things. I can say, well, that's not written down anywhere. I don't have to do that. But that's not true. I believe it's been very clear on my spirit that he's called me to a certain type of ministry to respond in a certain way. And we all have different gifts and skills according to what he's given us. And we need to be obedient to that if we love him. And if you missed that point, he continues to reiterate this throughout the rest of scriptures. But just a few verses down, you see it again. In verse 23, or let's start in verse 22. Judas, not Iscariot, said to him, Lord, how is it that you will manifest yourself to us and not the world? Jesus answered him, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word. And my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him. All of this is opened up if his word is kept. Not just a mental assent that is true and right, and this is great. We need to have this in our schools. We need to have this as a pillar for our country. We need to have this in every family. Yes, all of those things are true, but it needs to be actually kept. Not just upheld, not just heralded as something that's worthy of reverence, but something that's actually done. I remember when I first realized this about 20 years ago now. Wow. When I first studied the Bible, I had some brothers sit down with me, and I grew up pretty religious, so I thought I was fine. And they started sharing with me scripture after scripture, opening the Bible up to study with me about what it really meant to follow Jesus. And I was so humbled as they shared in the word, because they shared in a different way that I wasn't used to. Look, they shared as if I'm really supposed to do the words that I'm reading. You see, up to this point, I knew it was a good book, and I knew it was filled of words of wisdom and proverbs, but they were actually reading it as if I'm supposed to do that right now. And it just was like cold water in my face. Like, wow, this is refreshing and new and convicting all at the same time. But that is the expectation. He expects us to know his commandments and actually do them, to love our neighbor, to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, to turn the other cheek, to not insult, to be forgiven, to do the things of love that we mentioned before, being patient, being kind, not boasting in evil, but rejoicing in the good. Brothers and sisters, as we close up our thoughts for today, let this resonate in your spirit, that if you truly want to show your love for Yeshua, if you truly do love him, you're going to keep his word. For if you love, you can't help but to give. You can give but not love, but you can't love without giving. And if you love him, you will obey his commandments, and you will seek these. May Yahweh bless you and your spirit and your day. Thank you for tuning in.